one plate, one glass, one chair pulled just slightly too far from the table, the way it had been every evening for 11 years since Harold died. Evelyn Marsh had money. She had the kind of money that made other people quiet when she walked into a room. The old kind, inherited and then doubled, the kind that lived in the bones of a house rather than in any bank statement. The Cole estate, no, that was someone else's story. This was the Marsh house on Sycamore Ridge. 4 bedrooms, a library nobody used anymore, and a kitchen that smelled like lemon polish and nothing else. What Evelyn did not have was a reason to sit at the head of that table and feel anything other than the specific weight of a life that had gone on longer than she'd expected it to. She was 63. Her daughter, Pauline, called every Sunday from Portland, Oregon, and the calls lasted exactly as long as they needed to and not a minute more. Pauline had her husband. Pauline had her boys. Pauline had a life that moved forward the way lives are supposed to, and Evelyn was grateful for that. Genuinely grateful. Even on the Sundays when she hung up the phone and stood in the kitchen for a long time after, not doing anything in particular. The physical therapist her doctor had sent, following her hip surgery, had recommended she hire a driver. Not because she couldn't drive. She could, and she was good at it, always had been, but because the nerve pain in her right leg came and went without warning, and the last time it had come while she was on Route 9, she had missed a stop sign by what she later described to Dr. Hensley as a matter of inches. Dr. Hensley had not found this amusing. So she called the agency, and the agency sent her a file. His name was Darnell Cooper, 38 years old, clean record, 7 years working private transport. References from 2 families in Fairfield County, 1 in Westchester, reliable, punctual. One previous employer had written, simply, "He is the kind of person who notices things." Evelyn had set the file down on the kitchen table and looked at it for a while. She did not know why that last line stayed with her. She told herself it didn't matter what kind of person he was, as long as he could drive. He arrived the following Monday at 7:58 in the morning, 2 minutes early, in a gray Accord that was not new, but was immaculate. He knocked on the side door rather than the front, which she noticed. He was tall, broad-shouldered in the way of a man who had worked physically earlier in life, and he wore a dark jacket that was clean and pressed without being formal. He had a quiet face. Not closed, exactly, but careful. "Mrs. Marsh," he said. "I'm Darnell. I know who you are," she said. "Come in." She offered him coffee. He said yes, black, and sat at the kitchen table without being invited to, which should have been presumptuous and somehow wasn't. He looked around the kitchen the way people look at rooms they are trying to memorize. "You have a lot of photographs," he said. "Most people don't comment on them. I notice there aren't any recent ones." She poured her own coffee. "No," she said, "there aren't. He didn't press it." That was the first thing she noticed about Darnell Cooper. He knew when a conversation had reached its edge, and he didn't step over it. He had a daughter. Evelyn found this out not from him but from the car. The second time he drove her. A small pink sneaker wedged between the passenger seat and the door, and a folded drawing on the dashboard, crayon on construction paper. A house with a lopsided chimney and 2 figures standing outside it, one tall and one very small. "How old?" she asked. He glanced at the drawing. 7, he said. "Her name's Cora. Does she know she's the subject of public art?" He smiled at that. It was the first time she'd seen him smile, and it changed his whole face. Younger, easier, something relieved about it. "She made me put it on the dashboard," he said. "Said she wanted to make sure I could always find my way home." Evelyn looked out the window at the road going past. "Smart girl," she said. She didn't ask more. But she thought about it. The drawing, the sneaker, a 7-year-old who thought in those terms. Find my way home. As if home were a place you could lose. She knew something about that. The weeks passed the way weeks do when a routine takes shape. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays for appointments and errands. The occasional Saturday for the farmer's market on Elm Street, which Evelyn had attended for 30 years and intended to attend until she physically could not. Darnell drove. He carried bags when she didn't object. He learned quickly that she didn't want conversation in the car unless she started it, and that she started it more often than she had expected to. He told her once that he'd grown up moving around. Foster care, group homes, a series of addresses that never quite became places. He said it without self-pity, which was its own kind of statement. He said it the way you say the weather was cold or the road was long, a fact, a thing that was true. "You don't have family here?" she asked. They were stopped at a light on Carver Street. "Not that I know of," he said. "What does that mean, not that you know of?" He was quiet for a moment. "It means I don't know who I come from," he said. "I was left at a hospital when I was 3 days old. There were no records that led anywhere useful." He paused. "I stopped looking a long time ago." The light changed. He drove. Evelyn said nothing for the rest of the ride. When he pulled up to the curb outside Dr. Hensley's office, she sat in the back seat for a moment longer than necessary. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "That must have been a hard way to grow up. It made me who I am," he said. "I'm okay with who I am." She got out of the car. She told herself the feeling in her chest was the cold air. It was October. These things happened. She had a box. She had kept it for 38 years in the bottom drawer of the bureau in the room that used to be a guest room and was now mostly just closed. A shoebox, the kind that costs nothing, with a rubber band around it that had gone brittle and snapped the last time she'd touched it, years ago. She hadn't replaced the rubber band. She'd just placed the lid back on and closed the drawer. Inside the box, a hospital bracelet, pink, not blue. She had asked them to use pink because she'd thought somehow it mattered, even then. A single photograph, blurry, taken by a nurse with a Polaroid camera that had been old even in 1987. A folded piece of paper with a name written on it in her own handwriting, a name she had chosen and given and then had taken back or tried to. The name she had whispered once and then told herself she had not. His name had been, she had written Franklin. She had been 25. She had been 3 months away from the wedding that her parents had arranged with such careful, deliberate relief, the right family, the right background, the right future. She had been terrified in the specific way of a young woman who could see exactly 2 roads and could not afford either of them. The man, the father, had been kind. That was the part she had never been able to put down and leave behind, the fact that he had been genuinely, quietly kind, and she had been too frightened to let that be enough. She had made the decision in a hospital room in Albany, alone, in the dark. She had held him for 6 minutes. She knew it was 6 minutes because she had counted. Some part of her brain had insisted on counting, as if the number would matter later. As if she could hold it like the bracelet, take it out, confirm it. 6 minutes, that is what it cost. She had told Harold, her husband-to-be, that the pregnancy had ended on its own. Harold had held her hand and said he was sorry and never raised it again. She had let him believe that for 38 years. She had not let herself stop believing it deserved to be true. The day she opened the drawer again was a Thursday in November. She had no reason to open it that particular day. She would not have been able to explain why if anyone had asked. She had come upstairs for a scarf and walked past the guest room door and stopped. She stood in the hallway for a minute. Then she went in, opened the bottom drawer, and looked at the box. She did not pick it up. She just looked at it. Darnell was waiting in the car to take her to the pharmacy. She closed the drawer. She went downstairs. She wrapped the scarf around her neck and went out the side door, and he was there, engine running, the dashboard drawing still in its place. She got in. She looked at the drawing for a moment, the lopsided chimney, the 2 figures, the careful crayon house. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Let's go." It was a small thing that broke the surface, the way small things always are. Not the hospital bracelet, not the photograph, not the 38 years. It was a bracelet Darnell wore on his left wrist. simple braided, a combination of brown and faded orange cord. She had noticed it before and thought nothing of it. But that particular Tuesday, the light in the car was different. Late afternoon coming in sideways, and she saw it clearly for the first time. "Where did you get that?" she asked. He glanced at his wrist. "I've had it since I was a baby," he said. "It was in the box of things the hospital sent with me when I went into foster care." He paused. "I've never taken it off. I don't even know who put it on me." Evelyn's hands were folded in her lap. She had braided it herself, in the hospital room, from a craft kit her mother had sent. An absurd gift in retrospect. A craft kit as though she might spend her time at the maternity ward making things. She had braided it at 3 in the morning with shaking hands and tied it around his wrist before the nurse took him. She had thought, at least he will have this one thing. "Are you all right?" Darnell asked. "I'm fine," she said. "Keep driving." She called Pauline that Sunday. Not the usual Sunday call. She called on a Sunday morning, before Pauline's boys would be awake, before the household noise started. "Mom?" Pauline answered after 2 rings, alert immediately in that way of mothers. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Evelyn said. "I need to talk to you about something." The silence on the other end was the silence of a woman bracing herself. "I had a child before you," Evelyn said. "A boy. I gave him up for adoption when he was 3 days old. I have never told you this, and I am telling you now because—" She stopped. She pressed her hand against the kitchen counter. "Because I believe he may be my driver." The silence this time was different. "Mom, I know how that sounds. How could you possibly—" "There is a bracelet," Evelyn said. "I made it. I would know it anywhere." She paused, and other things. The way he carries himself. The age. Albany. She was aware she was constructing a case as she spoke, assembling evidence the way you do when you already know the verdict and are working backward. "I could be wrong," she said. "I am probably wrong." "Mom," Pauline said again more quietly. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. You need to be careful. You can't tell him something like that without being certain." "I know. And if it is—" Pauline stopped. "You left him, Mom. He didn't choose that." "I know," Evelyn said. "I know that." She had the genetic testing kit sent to a lab in Hartford, the kind that could be processed with a hair sample. She told herself it was precautionary. She told herself she was being responsible. She collected the sample, a terrible thing, a small and necessary invasion, and sent it with a check of her own hair, and waited. 17 days. She did not tell Darnell anything. She drove with him twice a week and sat in the back seat and listened to him talk about Cora's school play, about the book he was reading, about the way winter came differently to Connecticut than anywhere else he'd lived. He was easy to listen to. He had always been easy to listen to. She had noticed that from the first week and had not let herself think too hard about why that was. One afternoon she asked him, "Do you ever want to know who your parents were?" He drove for a moment before answering. "I used to," he said. "When I was younger, I was angry about it, I think. The not knowing felt like the worst part. Worse than the group homes, even." He paused. "But I've got Cora now. And she's got me. That's a complete thing." He looked in the rearview mirror, not at her, at the road behind them. "I figure whatever the reason was, it was their reason, not mine to carry." Evelyn looked at her hands. "That's very generous," she said. "Not really," he said. "It's just carrying it was heavier." The results came on a Tuesday. She opened the email in the kitchen, standing up with her coat still on. She read the results 3 times. Then she sat down. She sat at the kitchen table for a very long time, in her coat, without moving. Outside, the yard was gray and bare and exactly what it always was. The photographs on the wall were the same photographs they had always been. Harold at 40, Pauline at 2, the house in better light from a summer 20 years ago. The photographs that stopped somewhere in the middle of a life and didn't continue. She thought about a hospital room in Albany. She thought about 6 minutes. She thought about a man who had grown up with no address that became a home, who had made a home anyway, who had put a crayon drawing on his dashboard so he could always find his way back to his daughter. She thought about what Pauline had said. You left him. He didn't choose that. When Darnell arrived on Friday, she asked him to come inside. He came in and sat at the kitchen table, the same chair as always, and she sat across from him, and she set the bracelet photograph on the table between them. It was the Polaroid from the hospital, blurry and old, but clear enough. A newborn, a braided cord bracelet in brown and orange on his tiny wrist. Darnell looked at the photograph. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at her. I need to tell you something, Evelyn said. And I need you to know that I am not telling you this because I expect anything from you. I am telling you because you deserve to know the truth, and I have owed you that truth for 38 years, and I am ashamed that it took me this long to find the courage to say it. The kitchen was very quiet. I was 25, she said. I was scared. I have told myself for 38 years that I didn't have a choice, and maybe that was true, and maybe it wasn't. And I have spent 38 years not letting myself answer that question honestly. She stopped. I gave you that bracelet, she said. I made it the night before you were taken. I wanted you to have something. She looked at his wrist. I never imagined you would still be wearing it. Darnell did not speak. He looked at the photograph. He looked at his wrist. He looked at her. Then he stood up from the table, slowly, and walked to the window. He stood with his back to her, looking out at the yard. She waited. She had no right to anything else. I need to go, he said. Of course, I'm not. He stopped. He pressed his hand against the window frame. I'm not ready for this conversation. I understand. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for this conversation. I know. He stood there a moment longer. Then he turned and she saw his face. Not angry, exactly, but cracked open in a way that looked like it hurt. He looked at her and she looked back. And there were 38 years between them and a photograph and a bracelet and a kitchen with no recent photographs on the wall, and neither of them looked away. He picked up his keys from the counter. He walked to the side door. He stopped with his hand on the doorframe. Her name is Cora, he said. She's 7 years old. His voice was careful, contained, each word placed down deliberately. She doesn't have any grandparents. He walked out. The door closed behind him. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table and did not move for a very long time. Outside, she heard his car start. She heard it idle for a moment, longer than usual. She heard it pull away. The kitchen was quiet. The photographs on the wall were quiet. 38 years of silence, still ringing. But somewhere down Sycamore Ridge, a man was driving home to his daughter, and for the first time, the name of his mother was not a mystery. It was a beginning. Maybe not a forgiveness. Maybe not even a reconciliation. But it was a door left open, and sometimes that is the bravest thing a person can offer, and the hardest thing another person can choose to walk through. What would you do if you were Darnell? Would you walk back through that door?